Today, I'm going to tell you exactly why your lungs feel tight during workouts and what you can do about it. So, we just wrapped up the CrossFit Games Open at my gym, and 25.3 was only a few days ago at the time of this recording. And I realized one thing during this entire Open, at least for me personally, was that the weight wasn't too bad. The skills wasn't bad. I didn't really get crushed by anything skill-wise or weight-wise, but man, my lungs felt tight on every single workout. Like, my breathing was the main problem. And for a while there, at least when I first started, I'm like, "Oh, man, I just gotta do more aerobic-based training and everything," which I do. I still need to do that a lot. And I don't train like I used to, so I don't do a ton of threshold training anymore. And I realized that that really was the missing puzzle piece to at least a lot of my fitness, because zone 2 work I have been doing, not nearly as frequently as I used to, but I still do it. And I have been lifting a lot more too, but I'm kind of missing like that middle ground. And I'm going to be speaking on that today because it was just kind of a pain point for me. And I hope this helps you. So I am on my series of one podcast a week for the next year. We're about a quarter of the way through already, which is fantastic. So yay, kudos to me. And if it's your first time joining us, I'm Matt Banwart. I own Red Wolf CrossFit in Huntington Beach, California with my wife, Caitlin. And we started this podcast with one goal in mind, and that was to make fitness education accessible, engaging, and effective for everyone. So a common problem that I know a lot of you have and that I had recently, which just got slapped in my face, was that my lungs felt really tight, or I felt kind of breathless in workouts, even though my heart rate didn't get really high. So I did look at my heart rate. Did it get high? Absolutely. But it usually gets that high regardless. But I did feel very breathless during workouts. And this is something I haven't had a problem with since I first started CrossFit. And so I'm going to be shifting my training. And so because I'm shifting my training, I really feel like it was my job to let you know what I'm going to be working on and what you'll see in some of the program design, and something that you might not be aware of, but you are now. So overview of this episode is that why your lungs feel tight during workouts, how CO2 buildup affects breathing, how to train your lungs like a muscle, and then some breathing workouts, and along with just workouts in general that you can do to fix it. So let's get right into our main point today, or not really the main point, but let's get right into why your lungs feel tight in the first place. And so this is simply just CO2 buildup and respiratory fatigue. Okay. So high intensity work, like the open workouts, or you can even throw in like sprinting, like 300-meter sprints, produces a lot of CO2. And what happens is your body produces a lot faster CO2 than your body can clear. So if you're not trained for it, your brain kind of panics, and this can make you feel like you're not getting enough air. And for those of you listening to this, if something like shorter duration, let's say under a minute, like an easy example of this relative to the 300-meter run would be like a 100-meter sprint, that may feel fine because it's short enough to where there's not enough CO2 buildup to where it doesn't accumulate as much in your system. So really, essentially what this is a little bit longer time duration or time domain. And this is essentially comes down to diaphragm and respiratory muscle fatigue, just like any other muscle can get fatigued. And your diaphragm is literally a muscle, and if it's weak or if it fatigues fast, breathing does get harder. Okay, so this is something you can actually train organically, and you'll get better. And the better breathing you are, the more you're able to clear lactate out of your system and use your aerobic system as your main energy system. And so a lot of us will either shallow breathe or we'll do deep diaphragmatic breathing. So if you watch some of the best competitors out there, they'll do very deep diaphragmatic breathing. And what that looks like is they'll belly breathe a lot. And well, myself included, a lot of us do shallow breathing, like really short, like, deep, fast breaths like that, which is not nearly as effective as diaphragmatic breathing. But then again, since your muscles aren't as strong, your diaphragmatic or respiratory system muscles aren't as strong, we resort to that as a default. And so this is why people like myself who train a lot of strength and power and aerobic work tend to struggle with breathing endurance. So because we don't really train this middle ground enough. And this is actually really hard to train effectively by just doing CrossFit. You have to do a little more specialty or threshold training, specific intervals, in order to improve this. So what happens is that lactate will accumulate in the breathing muscles themselves, and so this can tax the rib muscles, okay, and the diaphragm, which can lead to that muscle tightness feeling. And this is why, if repeated efforts, like short repeated efforts, like anything between 90 seconds to like maybe 3 to 4 minutes, will actually make you feel worse depending on the rest intervals. And so some easy ways to test this to see if this is a diaphragmic issue or a heart rate issue is to do there's three different really simple ways that I like to test this. So it's either 6 sets of 300-meter sprints at 90% effort and you rest 2 minutes and 30 seconds, 8 sets of 200-meter sprints at 95% effort and a 2-minute rest, or 5 sets of 400-meter sprints at 80 to 85% effort with a 3 to 4-minute rest. So with these rest intervals, it gives us enough time to clear lactate, but just enough to where we have to go again. And then this also lets me know that if it's your heart rate or if it's your lungs or a combination of both that gives out first, okay? Because if it's just your heart rate that gets spiked, but your breathing is able to handle it, okay, then that means we just got to do more aerobic-based building, and we can go from there. If it's more kind of like what I'm talking about today, which is the diaphragmic breathing or breathing that's tough to the lungs, like you're breathing out of a tailpipe, then we need to do more threshold training, okay? And again, if it's a combination of both, we just got to get you fitter in general, okay? And some easy ways to train your breathing like a muscle is to just have better breathing efficiency and CO2 tolerance drills, okay? So, nasal breathing is something I don't do a lot of, but I need to do that I plan on incorporating a lot more. So we're starting with like 5 to 10 minutes of nasal only breathing to improve efficiency, okay? So this is something that's best done when you're doing kind of lighter workouts, because if you do this right away in like a high intensity workout, it's not going to end well for you and you're going to resort to your panic breathing again. So this is something you want to do with easier duration efforts and just only breathe through your nose. Another method is to do controlled exhales as well. So this is a 1-to-2 ratio. So you inhale for 3 seconds and then exhale for 6 seconds to train better CO2 clearance. And then you can also do breath holds as well. So you do brief breath holds post exhale to improve tolerance. So simply you just breathe out and you hold your breath for a little bit, and that will help some of your diaphragmic breathing. And then obviously we have to build anaerobic capacity for breathing strength as well. So we're talking about well, before I get into the actual program design of it, which I know that you're kind of waiting for the meat and potatoes, but let's actually go into recovery and long-term fixes. This is what you would do post-workout, and then I'll actually go into the workouts themselves. So some easy things you can do immediately after you finish a workout, especially a high anaerobic or just a traditional CrossFit workout, is to do work on your post-workout breathing recovery. So what that looks like, probably the best method is box breathing. I used to do this a lot when I was training full time. I don't do this as much anymore, but this is again something I plan on implementing into my training, so I thought I'd share it, which is inhale for 4 seconds, hold for 4 seconds, exhale for 4 seconds, and then hold again for 4 seconds. Okay, so that's one thing that I plan on integrating into my training post-workout. You can also do elevated breathing drills. This is something I've seen some people do. Not a whole lot of people, but I have seen it, so I thought I'd mention it, which is where you just lie down with a weight on your stomach and you focus on deep belly breaths, okay? So if you see that's a really good way to think about it, though, is that when you're doing a workout, think about breathing through your belly, and that will be more diaphragmic in general. You'll get better air, better oxygen from there, and you'll be able to clear CO2 much more efficiently. And then also, this is something I do currently that I really like to do is to go on an active recovery walk immediately after the workout. So after the fist bumps, I go outside and I walk a 200 or a 400, and that will help kind of cool me down, kind of clear lactate, and I focus on my breathing, and also do your box breathing that way as well, which I plan on doing. And when to expect improvements is that we can expect to see improvements on this anywhere between 2 to 3 weeks, maybe. It just kind of depends on how frequently you're training. And you'll notice that there's going to be less lung tightness, that there can be faster breathing recovery, and you also have more control during intense efforts themselves, okay? So that's what to expect. Now let's go and get into the best training methods in order to do this. And I'm just going to kind of go through what I've done in the past and what I plan on going to in the future. So again, we want these exercises. Now, so before I continue, there's one thing that we got to get notice here, or we have to address here, which is that you don't want to choose exercises that are high skill, that have a lot of muscle fatigue, or that are very heavy. Because the problem is that that's when you're kind of training, more skill or central nervous system based. We want to have an organic adaptation here. So we want it to be low skill. We want it to be very cyclical, where there's no thinking. And what high cyclical means, it just means a very fast turnover movement. So you have to think biking, running, double unders, burpees, kettlebell swings, things that you don't really have to think about, but you can go hard at, and that will just tax you in general. So one threshold training that you can do, one of the best protocols is 4 to 6 rounds of 4 to 5 minutes of 90% effort Rowing. I really like rowing. I think rowing's mimics CrossFit moves very well because it's a very hip opening, hip closing, and requires the midline a lot. I also like doing 30-30 intervals on both the row and the echo bike as well. Okay. And I usually start at around anywhere between 10 to 15 minutes of 30 seconds on. You want to be about a very hard pace. So not an all out sprint, but we want to go at a very aggressive pace. So like to the point where like the last 5-10 seconds really suck every interval. And then the 30 seconds, you just do an easy spin and that will help clear some of the lactate. And that's exactly what you're training. So you want to start off, if you're a beginner, probably start off maybe 5-10 minutes, and then eventually you want to build up to 30 minutes. And eventually you can even go up to an hour. I have seen some people go up to an hour. You can also use the same approach with running. So some really simple running intervals, especially in that time domain, would be roughly 4 to 6 rounds of 800-meter repeats or 800-meter runs at 80 to 90% effort with a 2 to 3 minute rest. You can also throw in like fartlek intervals in there as well. We throw a lot of these kind of interval styles into our build and burn, specifically the burn section. If you don't know what that is, that's just simply a bolt-on program that we use that complements our CrossFit classes that gives you both build, which is to build extra strength or to build muscle, burn, which is to burn just a little extra calories or more fat burning style workouts, along with building an aerobic base. We also just recently added a competition track on there as well. So another way to incorporate the Echo Bike, which is probably one of the best ways to incorporate the most versatile machine out there. I know you guys hate it, but guess what? You hate it for a reason, and you hate it because it's actually effective. Because if it didn't suck, it wouldn't be effective. Welcome to CrossFit. So I like the Echo Bike the most for building this kind of capacity because it's very very high power output. There's zero impact on the joints, and it's great for sustained VO2 max training. Okay. So one of the best protocols is that you can do to build this is 5 sets of 3-minute work, about 90-second recovery. You can even go up to 3-minute recovery because that will clear lactate even more. 90 seconds is good for building capacity, about that 3-to-3 ratio or the 1-to-1 work to rest ratio. So if you go 3 minutes, you rest 3 minutes, that's really good for building power. Okay. If you want to rest even longer, great, because that will build even more power on top of that. So the shorter the rest, the more you're working capacity, the longer the rest, the more you're training power. That's really the key takeaway here. So that's why I actually prefer a 1-to-1 because you kind of get like a hybrid of both. And then obviously doing the 30 seconds on, 30 seconds easy for starting at 10 sets is probably a good place to start. And then building all the way up to 30 to 45 minutes is very normal. One of the hardest workouts I've ever done was that. I did 45 minutes of 30 seconds hard, 30 seconds easy for 45 minutes straight. And that really built up my capacity. Was it boring? Absolutely. I hated every minute of it. But did it give me capacity? Absolutely. And then one of the big reasons, again, that I forgot to mention why I like the Echo Bike is that it's both a push and a pull of the upper body, and you're using your legs and you're using your midline. So it's a very full body exercise. One of my coaches actually compared it to swimming, just without, like the breathing technique, without timing your breathing in the water, because it's about as close as you can get to it on dry land. We all know that swimming is very difficult, especially because you have to time your breathing with everything. You can also do sled pushes. I'm not a huge fan of sleds in this just because you're limited by the amount of weight you're doing. So I do prefer the machines better, just personally. But you can definitely train lactate and raw power at VO2 max using heavy sled sprints as well. Um, you have to be very short. Another really sucky workout that I did back in the day was 3 sets of 100-meter sled drive as fast as I could. The sled was completely empty, but I pushed that sled as fast as I could for 100 meters, and I rested 5 minutes in between. And that really, really sucked. That really got the lactate threshold up there really well. Now you can incorporate this in a mixed modal setting. So by mixed modal, that just means incorporating multiple exercises. So one of the best lactate threshold workouts that I can remember that I've done, actually there's two. I'll just go over the one that I can remember the best off the top of my head that my coach had me do when I was peaking for regionals back in 2014, is that we did 3 sets and there was a 5-minute rest in between each set. It was a 500-meter row, then it was 15 bar facing burpees and then 15 clean and jerks at 95 pounds. And it was good because it was low skill and it was lightweight because of the clean and jerks and it was the burpees. And I remember doing that and being like, that was the first time, after accumulating all the training where I really felt all those really boring, blunt and sucky intervals really paid off because when I did that and I went hard, I was holding like a I was holding under a 140 on the 500 every set really easily, like without much fatigue. The burpees were really fast, unbroken, and the clean and jerks 15 were unbroken with a 5-minute rest, and I felt great on every set. That's where I really felt like, okay, all that work that I did that on that stupid echo bike or assault bike really paid off. And it's really cool to see that is when you can really tolerate such a high intensity and clear it and repeat it. That is one of the best feelings in the world because you can go into that suck zone and then keep going, and then it just feels great when it just all clicks together. You can also mix in high intensity interval training or a threshold work on this. So what this looks like, and this kind of a good wrap up and summary of everything when it comes to training on this, is that in terms of intensity, that you want the intensity to be about 85 to 90% of your max heart rate. Okay, so you really want to be pushing the effort. Now, sometimes some people's heart rates just really are naturally lower, or some people's heart rates are just naturally higher. So this is why I don't really like using heart rate as a key indicator of either fitness or training because some people just be based on their genetics are just different. So think of it more like 85 to 90% effort. Okay. And then in terms of duration of each set, you want to be about 2 to 5 minutes of work per set. 5 minutes is really pushing it. So it has to be really short. I would even argue maybe you could go 90 seconds, but even then that's a little short. So about 2 to 4 minutes is like my sweet spot for that threshold training. And in terms of rest, you want about a 1 to 1 or 1 to 2 ratio. Okay. So I know CrossFit is really known for just going kind of straight through like AMRAPs for time, EMOMs. What this allows us to do is to go at a much higher effort per set and then have full or close to full recovery between every set. And then when you're training this, when you're training that kind of speed, think of it like anything else. Like even though that if you're training for like a 1 mile run and you still do 4 meter repeats, but at a higher intensity, of course you're gonna have much better tolerance on that 1 mile because you've been training repeats over and over again. It's the same philosophy from track training or running training as you're using here, but we're just doing it in a mixed modal setting or in a more of a CrossFit bias setting. So that's the best way to train it. I hope that answers all your questions on it. Now let's get into the final thing, which is let's talk about frequency and how often should you be doing this. You should be doing this at least 2 to 3 times per week in your training, okay? In order to see adaptations. You can get away with less, believe me, but you have to expect that gains are going to come a lot slower and your threshold is going to build a lot slower. Now, you also want to take about anywhere between 24 to 48 hours off in between because this is going to be more taxing than like zone 2 work or even like a traditional CrossFit workout because you are going to be working at higher intensities repeated. And again, it just depends on how what your personal tolerance is, how fast you recover in between things. Also your nutrition, sleep, stress, and lifestyle on top of that. So there's a lot that goes into it. Again, the best way to know what's best for you or how frequently to do this is to talk to your coach. Now, what do we do in between these if we want to still build capacity and still use that same and still build this capacity for free? Is you do more zone 2 aerobic work, and we're looking at between 30 to 60 minutes of steady state aerobic work at a pace that's higher than a warm up pace. Okay, so it's still conversational. You can still have a conversation with it, but you should still be kind of sweaty, and then you should still be moving and still feeling the exercise itself. So if this was helpful, do me a favor and share this with a friend or leave me a review. I'd really appreciate it because every time I see the numbers go up, it keeps me more motivated to keep putting out this content for you guys to educate you more and to share what I'm doing and also the plan going forward for my gym at Red Wolf. So really appreciate you listening, and do me a favor, leave me a 5-star review if you like this content, and that way I know to make more of it just for you. Okay? So I'll catch you guys on the next one. Good luck, have fun, and nailed it.